I was 32 when I discovered that being the responsible child doesn't always pay off. My grandfather's trust fund should have secured my future, but instead it became the catalyst for exposing a web of family manipulation that went back decades. What the trust manager uncovered would change everything. Not just about my inheritance, but about everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning everything changed, I was reviewing quarterly projections in my corner office at Palmer & Associates. The downtown Seattle skyline stretched out before me, a view I'd earned through 15 years of dedicated work, starting as an intern and climbing to senior investment director. My grandfather had always said success was built on discipline and persistence. Looking at that view, I could almost hear his voice. Remember, Alexander, wealth isn't given, it's earned through smart decisions. The irony of his words would become apparent soon enough. My administrative assistant knocked on my door, her expression unusually serious. Mr. Palmer, there's a Mr. Richardson from Meridian Trust on line 2. He says it's regarding your grandfather's estate. I felt a slight tightening in my chest. Howard Richardson had been managing my grandfather's trust for over 2 decades. He never called without good reason. Alexander. Howard's voice carried its usual measured tone, but something felt off. We need to discuss some irregularities that have come to light. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? The word irregularities hung in the air like a storm cloud. Of course, I replied, already rearranging my mental schedule. 3 o'clock. Perfect. And Alexander, you might want to clear your evening schedule as well. After hanging up, I stared at the Seattle rain pattering against my office window. My grandfather, Richard Palmer Sr., had passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind a substantial estate primarily held in trust. The initial reading of the will had been straightforward. The bulk of his estate would be distributed through the trust he'd established years ago, with specific provisions for each family member. My portion was meant to be significant. A reward, he'd said, for following in his footsteps in the financial sector and maintaining the family's business legacy. My younger brother Marcus, meanwhile, had chosen a different path. While I spent my 20s building my career, he'd bounced between startups and creative ventures, leaving a trail of failed businesses and debt in his wake. The familiar buzz of my phone interrupted my thoughts. Speaking of Marcus, his name flashed on the screen, along with a string of missed calls from my parents. My stomach tightened. Something was definitely wrong. I ignored the calls, focusing instead on preparing. For my meeting with Howard, I pulled up my grandfather's trust documents, reviewing them for the 100th time. Everything seemed in order: the distribution schedules, the conditions, the asset allocations. I'd built my future plans around these provisions, including the down payment on a waterfront property I'd been eyeing. At precisely 3 o'clock, I walked into Meridian Trust's elegant offices in downtown Seattle. Howard's assistant led me to a conference room where Howard waited, surrounded by stacks of documents. His usual warm smile was replaced by a look of professional concern. "Thank you for coming, Alexander," he began, gesturing to a chair. "What I'm about to share with you is complicated." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your parents contacted us last week with some additional documentation regarding your grandfather's wishes. They're requesting a significant modification to the trust's distribution." My throat went dry. "What kind of modification?" "They want to split your portion equally with Marcus." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not possible," I said, my voice steady despite the shock. "The trust terms are clear. Grandfather was explicit about the distribution." Howard nodded, then reached for a document. "Yes, he was. However, your parents provided this letter, allegedly written by your grandfather shortly before his death. It expresses his desire to ensure equal treatment of his grandchildren, regardless of their life choices. I stared at the letter, my financial training kicking in. Something didn't add up. "May I?" I asked, reaching for the document. Howard handed it over, watching my reaction carefully. The letter was typed on my grandfather's personal stationery, his signature at the bottom. But as I read it, details began to jump out at me. The language wasn't his. The sentiments expressed contradicted everything he'd ever said about responsibility and earning one's way. "Your parents are quite insistent," Howard continued. "They've already engaged legal counsel and are prepared to challenge the trust's current terms." I looked up from the letter, meeting Howard's gaze. "And what do you think about all this?" A slight smile crossed his face. "I've managed your grandfather's trust for 23 years, Alexander. I knew him well, which is why I've spent the last week conducting a thorough investigation of this letter and several other recent modifications to his financial arrangements." He reached for another folder, this one considerably thicker. "What I've found raises some serious questions, not just about this letter, but about a pattern of financial decisions made in the months before your grandfather's death. Decisions that, quite frankly, don't align with his established patterns or stated intentions." The rain had stopped outside, leaving the city in that peculiar golden light that sometimes follows a storm. As Howard began laying out his findings, I realized this was more than just a dispute over inheritance. It was about truth, justice, and the complex web of family loyalty and betrayal. What he would reveal over the next 2 hours would shake the very foundation of my family's legacy and force me to make decisions that would reshape not just my future, but the very nature of my family relationships. Howard spread the documents across the conference room table with methodical precision. Each paper represented a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed until now. The Seattle skyline had darkened outside the windows of Meridian Trust's offices, but neither of us made any move to turn on more lights. The subtle glow of the desk lamp seemed appropriate for the revelations that were about to unfold. "Your grandfather was meticulous about his records," Howard began, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades of professional trust management. "Every decision, every transaction, every modification to his estate planning was documented with multiple copies. He believed in accountability above all else." I nodded, remembering the countless lectures about documentation and due diligence I'd received from my grandfather during my early days in finance. "He used to say that paper trails don't lie, even when people do." "Exactly," Howard replied, pulling out a particular stack of documents. "Which is why these recent changes raised immediate red flags. In the last 4 months of his life, there were 17 attempted modifications to various trust arrangements. All of them would have effectively reduced your portion of the inheritance while increasing the allocations to your brother Marcus." My throat tightened. 17 attempts? "Yes, but here's where it gets interesting." Howard pointed to various signatures on the documents. "Look at these signatures. They're all slightly different from your grandfather's known signature pattern. More importantly, they're different from each other." I leaned forward, my professional training kicking in. He was right. The signatures showed subtle variations, pressure points, slant angles, terminal strokes, that wouldn't be obvious to an untrained eye, but were clear. Evidence of forgery to anyone who knew what to look for. "There's more," Howard continued, pulling out another file. "During this same period, there were unusual access patterns to your grandfather's personal accounts. Small withdrawals, nothing suspicious on its own, but they formed a pattern. Every withdrawal was followed by a deposit of the same amount into accounts connected to your brother Marcus. The implications were staggering. Are you saying someone was systematically siphoning money from my grandfather's accounts?" "Not just someone," Howard said quietly. "The access codes used for these transactions were registered to your parents' devices." the room seemed to tilt slightly. My parents, the pillars of propriety and ethical behavior who had raised me to value honesty above all else, had apparently been orchestrating a complex financial manipulation scheme. But why now? I asked, more to myself than Howard. Why not wait until after the trust distribution? Howard's expression was grave. Because of the cognitive assessment clause. Of course, my grandfather had included a provision requiring a cognitive assessment if any major changes were made to the trust after his 80th birthday. It was his way of ensuring that no one could take advantage of him if his mental faculties declined. Any changes made now after his death would face intense scrutiny. Your parents filed these documents claiming they were recently discovered among your grandfather's papers, Howard explained. But the paper stock analysis tells a different story. These documents were printed less than 2 months ago, using a printer model that wasn't even available when your grandfather was alive. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of this information settle over me. My phone buzzed again, another call from Marcus. I silenced it without looking. There's something else you should know, Howard said, his tone softening slightly. Your grandfather came to see me privately 3 weeks before his death. He was concerned about attempts to access his accounts and documents. He asked me to initiate a full audit if anything seemed suspicious after his passing. He pulled out one final document, a letter written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. He also left this for you. I was instructed to provide it only if evidence of manipulation emerged. With slightly trembling hands, I took the letter. The paper was high-quality stationery, the same type my grandfather had used for important correspondence throughout his life. His precise handwriting filled the page. Dear Alexander, if you're reading this, it means my suspicions were correct. Someone has attempted to alter my carefully considered plans for my estate. I've spent a lifetime building not just wealth, but a legacy of integrity and responsibility. You've proven yourself worthy of that legacy, not just through your professional success, but through your character. The hardest lesson I've learned in life is that sometimes those closest to us can be motivated by greed rather than love. Don't let this discovery embitter you. Instead, let it strengthen your resolve to maintain the principles I've tried to instill. The truth, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. How you handle this revelation will define not just your inheritance, but your character. With trust and confidence, grandfather. I folded the letter carefully, my mind racing with implications and decisions to be made. Howard waited patiently, understanding the magnitude of what he'd revealed. What are my options? I finally asked, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil beneath. Legally, we have enough evidence to contest any modifications to the trust. We can also initiate a formal investigation into the unauthorized account access. Howard paused. However, given that this involves your immediate family, you might want to consider how to proceed carefully. He was right. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, betrayal, and the complex bonds of family. The path forward would require not just legal decisions, but moral ones as well. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The drive home from Meridian Trust that evening felt surreal. Seattle's familiar streets seemed somehow different, as if the revelations of the past few hours had altered not just my understanding of my family, but the very landscape of my life. My grandfather's letter sat in my briefcase, its weight far exceeding its physical presence. I had just pulled into my downtown apartment's parking garage when my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, putting the call on speaker as I gathered my things. Alexander, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you all day. Her voice carried that familiar note of authority she'd used throughout my childhood. We need to discuss some important family matters. Yes, we do, I replied, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. I just finished a very interesting meeting with Howard Richardson. The silence that followed was deafening. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted slightly. Oh? And what did Howard have to say? I think this conversation needs to happen. In person, I said, stepping into the elevator. I'll come by the house tomorrow morning at 9. Tomorrow? But Alexander, this is urgent. Your brother needs— 9 o'clock, Mother, I interrupted firmly. And make sure Marcus and Dad are there too. This concerns all of us. After ending the call, I spent the evening reviewing copies of the documents Howard had provided. Each page revealed another layer of systematic deception. The timestamps on the account access logs, the gradual pattern of financial manipulation, the carefully forged signatures, it all painted a picture of premeditated fraud that made my stomach turn. The next morning, I arrived at my parents' Victorian home in Queen Anne precisely at 9. The house had always impressed visitors with its old-world charm and meticulous maintenance, a physical representation of our family's supposed values. Now, I couldn't help but see it as a facade, much like the image of family unity we'd presented to the world. Marcus's Tesla was already parked in the driveway, its pristine condition at odds with his claimed financial struggles. I'd learned from Howard that my brother had recently purchased it with funds traced back to our grandfather's accounts. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell, her perfectly styled appearance betraying no sign of anxiety. Alexander, darling, come in. We're all in the study. The family study had been my grandfather's favorite room when he visited. Its walls were lined with leather-bound books and family photographs, including one of him and me at my college graduation. His proud smile in that photo now seemed to carry a different meaning. My father sat behind the massive mahogany desk, our grandfather's desk, while Marcus lounged in one of the leather armchairs, scrolling through his phone. They both looked up as I entered, Marcus with his usual casual indifference, my father with carefully constructed authority. Son, my father began, we need to discuss these recent developments with your grandfather's trust. We've discovered some documents that— Let's start with a different discussion, I interrupted, placing my briefcase on the desk. Let's talk about 17 attempted modifications to the trust, all with forged signatures. Or perhaps we should discuss the systematic withdrawal of funds using access codes registered to your devices. The room went perfectly still. Marcus's phone slipped from his hand onto the carpet. My mother's sharp intake of breath was the only sound. Those are serious accusations, my father said carefully, his corporate lawyer instincts taking over. They're not accusations, I replied, removing Howard's documentation from my briefcase. They're facts, documented, verified facts that include dates, timestamps, and digital signatures. Would you like to see the paper trail? Now, Alexander. My mother stepped forward, her voice taking on the soothing tone she'd used when I was a child. You have to understand, we were only trying to ensure fairness in the family. Marcus has had such difficulties, and your grandfather's distribution plan seemed so— Seemed so what, Mother? So aligned with his values? So consistent? With his belief in earning one's way? Or just so inconvenient to your plans? Marcus finally spoke up, his voice carrying a hint of desperation. You've always had it easy, Alex. Everything just works out for you. The perfect job, the perfect career path. Some of us have had to struggle. Struggle? I turned to face him. Is that what you call it? Because from where I stand, you've had every opportunity I had. The difference is, I chose to work while you chose to play. And when that didn't give you what you wanted, you all decided to steal it instead. The word steal hung in the air like a physical presence. My father's face darkened, and my mother sank into a chair, her perfectly maintained composure finally cracking. You have no proof, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. I laid out Howard's documents one by one on the desk. Bank records, access logs, forensic analysis of the forged documents. Grandfather knew something was wrong. He asked Howard to investigate if anything suspicious emerged after his death. Would you like to see his letter too? The silence that followed was absolute. Through the study's windows, I could see the garden where I'd spent countless hours, with my grandfather learning about business, ethics, and the true meaning of legacy. His voice seemed to echo in my mind. The truth, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. The tension in my grandfather's study had reached a breaking point. My father's legal training finally emerged as he straightened in his chair, adopting the posture I'd seen him use in countless negotiations. "Alexander," he began, his voice measured and controlled, "let's discuss this rationally. Whatever Howard thinks he's found, there are perfectly reasonable explanations. Your grandfather had expressed concerns about the distribution of his estate being inequitable. These modifications merely reflect his evolving thoughts on the matter." I removed another document from my briefcase, a preliminary report from the forensic accounting firm Howard had engaged. "Would you like to explain the evolving thoughts behind these systematic withdrawals? Or perhaps the series of shell companies established in Marcus's name that coincidentally received matching deposits?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual confidence evaporating. "Those were business investments," he protested, weakly. Grandfather believed in my entrepreneurial vision. Did his belief include authorizing transfers from his personal accounts using access codes registered to Mom's iPad? I questioned, maintaining steady eye contact. Because the digital audit trail is quite clear about the origin of those transactions. My mother's carefully manicured hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "We were trying to protect the family," she insisted. "Your brother needed support to establish himself. We couldn't stand by and watch him struggle While I what, Mother? While I worked 60-hour weeks building my career? While I earned every promotion and client relationship? While I lived according to the principles Grandfather taught us?" The morning sun filtered through the study's windows, illuminating the dust motes in the air. The same light that had once witnessed countless family discussions about integrity and responsibility now revealed the stark reality of our situation. "Howard has prepared 3 options," I continued, my professional training taking over. "I suggest you consider them carefully." Opening another folder, I laid out 3 documents on the antique desk. Option 1. We proceed with a full legal investigation. The Trust's forensic team has already uncovered enough evidence to justify criminal charges. This would likely result in significant legal consequences for everyone involved in the fraud. My father's face paled slightly, but he maintained his composed expression. As a corporate lawyer, he understood precisely what those consequences could entail. Option 2. We handle this privately, through the Trust's arbitration process. You formally withdraw all claims to modify the Trust's distribution, return all misappropriated funds, and provide a full accounting of all unauthorized transactions. This would avoid public legal proceedings, but would still require complete disclosure and restitution. Marcus leaned forward, his entrepreneurial mindset apparently engaging. "And option 3? "Option 3 is my proposal," I replied, removing my grandfather's letter from my briefcase. "We restructure the trust distribution under specific conditions. Marcus, you would receive a portion of the inheritance, but it would be managed through a structured disbursement program overseen by Howard. The funds would be tied to specific milestones: education, career development, legitimate business ventures with proper oversight." The room fell silent as they processed this unexpected alternative. My father's legal mind was undoubtedly analyzing the implications, while my mother's social consciousness was likely calculating the impact on our family's reputation. "Additionally," I continued, "there would be mandatory financial counseling and business mentorship requirements. No more unchecked spending, no more questionable ventures. If you want access to family resources, you'll need to demonstrate responsibility and accountability. And if we decline all three options? My father asked, his lawyer's instincts probing for alternatives. I met his gaze steadily. Then I instruct Howard to proceed with his legal obligation to report financial fraud to the relevant authorities. As a trustee, he's already documented everything. The choice of how this plays out rests with you. My mother rose suddenly, her social grace cracking under the pressure. How can you be so cold? We're your family. Yes, we are, I agreed, my voice softening slightly. Which is why I'm offering option 3. Grandfather believed in redemption through responsibility. He taught me that true support means helping people develop the skills to succeed, not enabling their worst tendencies. Standing up, I gathered the documents back into my briefcase. You have 24 hours to decide. I suggest you use this time to consider what kind of legacy you want to leave. Not just financially, but in terms of our family's values and reputation. As I turned to leave, Marcus spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically serious. Alex, wait. What would Grandfather have wanted? I paused at the study door, looking back at the family portrait hanging above the fireplace, 4 generations of Palmers, my grandfather standing proud and straight in the center. He would have wanted us to learn from this, I replied. He believed that wealth without wisdom was worthless, and that character was the true measure of success. Option 3 isn't just about money. It's about rebuilding trust and living up to the principles he taught us. The next 24 hours proved transformative for the Palmer family. I spent the evening in my downtown apartment, reviewing quarterly reports from Palmer and Associates while waiting for my family's decision. The Seattle skyline glittered beyond my windows, each light representing countless other families with their own complex dynamics and challenging decisions. At precisely 9 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Howard. Your brother is here at Meridian Trust, he said, his voice carrying a note of surprise. He came alone, and he's asking to speak with you. The news was unexpected. Marcus had always avoided confronting difficult situations directly, preferring to let our parents handle any complications. His initiative in this matter suggested something had shifted. 30 minutes later, I walked into Howard's office to find Marcus sitting alone, looking uncharacteristically subdued. His usual designer outfit was replaced by a simple button-down shirt and slacks. The transformation was subtle but noticeable. Thank you for coming, he began, his voice lacking its usual bravado. I spent all night thinking about what you said, about Grandfather's principles and the true meaning of legacy. Howard excused himself discreetly, leaving us alone in his well-appointed office. Through the windows, morning sunlight cast long shadows across the polished conference table. I found something last night, Marcus continued, reaching into his messenger bag. He pulled out an old leather-bound journal. It was in a box of Grandfather's things that Mom gave me to review a few months ago. I never opened it until now. The journal was our grandfather's business diary from his early years. I recognized it from the stories he used to tell us about building his first company. Marcus opened it carefully, turning to a dog-eared page. Listen to this entry from 1975. Today, I lost everything on a bad investment. The temptation to take shortcuts, to blur ethical lines, is strong when desperation sets in. But I remind myself that wealth can be rebuilt. Reputation once lost is gone forever. Marcus's voice wavered slightly as he continued reading. My sons and grandsons will inherit not just my success, but the principles that created it. They must understand that true wealth lies not in the numbers on a balance sheet, but in the strength of one's character. Looking up from the journal, Marcus met my eyes directly. I never really understood him, Alex. While you were learning about business strategies and ethical leadership, I was focused on quick wins and shortcuts. I convinced myself that my failures were everyone else's fault, that I deserved success, without earning it. The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Outside Howard's office, the bustling sounds of the financial district created a fitting backdrop for this moment of truth. When Mom and Dad suggested adjusting Grandfather's trust, it seemed like justice at first. Why should you get more just because you followed his path? But reading his journal last night, seeing his struggles and how he overcame them through integrity and hard work, it changed something in me. Standing up, Marcus walked to the window, his reflection overlaying the city view. "I want to accept option 3, he said firmly. "Not just the structured disbursement part, but everything. The financial counseling, the business mentorship, all of it. I want to earn my place in this family's legacy, not steal it." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected but unmistakable. For the first time in years, I saw glimpses of the brother I'd grown up with, before the entitlement and resentment had taken root. "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Marcus turned back from the window, his expression grim. "They're still convinced they were right. Dad's talking about legal challenges, Mom's alternating between guilt trips and threats. But I'm done letting them fight my battles. I need to take responsibility for my own life." Howard chose that moment to return, carrying additional documents. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said, placing a folder on the table. I took the liberty of preparing the necessary paperwork for option 3, including the mentorship program structure we discussed. Opening the folder, Howard revealed a comprehensive development plan. "Your grandfather actually outlined something similar years ago," he explained. "A program designed to help future generations earn their place in the family business. He called it the Palmer Legacy Initiative." Marcus picked up the document, scanning its contents with genuine interest. The program included executive education requirements, structured internships across different business units, and regular performance evaluations with industry mentors. "It won't be easy," I warned him. "This is about fundamental change, not just checking boxes." "I know," Marcus replied, reaching for a pen. "But for the first time in my life, I want something more than just money. I want to understand what Grandfather saw in you, what he tried to teach us all along." As he signed the documents, I felt a shift in the room's atmosphere. This wasn't just about resolving a family crisis anymore. It was about honoring a legacy of integrity and responsibility that our grandfather had spent his life building. The implementation of the Palmer Legacy Initiative began immediately following Marcus's signing of the documents. Howard had arranged for a transitional office space within Meridian Trust's building, where Marcus would begin his professional development program. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. Our grandfather had started his career in a similar office 4 decades earlier. "Your first assessment is scheduled for Monday morning," Howard explained, reviewing the program timeline. "We've engaged Davidson and Partners for the executive development portion. They're the same firm your grandfather used for leadership training throughout his career." Marcus nodded, his attention focused on the schedule before him. The program was intensive: morning sessions on financial analysis, afternoon workshops on business ethics and corporate governance, evening study periods for his executive MBA prerequisites. It was a far cry from his previous lifestyle of casual startups and impulsive ventures. As we left Meridian Trust that afternoon, my phone displayed 6 missed calls from our parents. Their response to Marcus's decision would undoubtedly be challenging, but that confrontation could wait. Right now, my brother needed to focus on his transformation. "I've arranged for a temporary apartment near the financial district," I told Marcus as we walked toward the parking garage. "It's nothing luxurious, but it's close to both Davidson and Partners and Meridian Trust. You'll need to be fully committed to this program." "What about my Tesla?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward his car. The question carried more weight than just transportation concerns. It represented his previous lifestyle, funded by misappropriated money. It goes back, I replied firmly. The program includes a full accounting of assets acquired through grandfather's accounts. Howard's team will handle the returns and restitution process. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Marcus, the entitled younger brother who had never faced real consequences. But it passed quickly, replaced by resolution. "You're right," he said, handing me the keys. "I need to start fresh." The next morning, I arrived early at Palmer & Associates to find an urgent message from our father. His law firm, Palmer & Palmer LLC, had filed a preliminary injunction challenging the trust's authority to implement the legacy initiative. It was a desperate move, legally questionable, and ethically bankrupt. I forwarded the filing to Howard, then made a call I'd been postponing. Sarah Chen, our firm's head of compliance and ethics, had been my mentor since my early days at Palmer & Associates. She deserved to know what was happening. "This could impact the firm's reputation," Sarah said after I explained the situation. Her office overlooked the same Seattle skyline as mine, but from 20 floors higher. "Your father's actions, while separate from Palmer & Associates, could raise questions about governance and ethical standards." "I know," I acknowledged. "That's why I'm here. I want to implement a comprehensive ethics and compliance review of all our operations. Full transparency, independent auditors, the works." Sarah's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "That's a significant undertaking, Alexander. It will mean examining every transaction, every client relationship, every business decision." "Including my own," I confirmed. "If we're going to address this family crisis, we need to demonstrate our commitment to ethical business practices at every level." A slight smile crossed Sarah's face. "Your grandfather would be proud. He always said the true test of leadership is how you handle challenges to your integrity." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. By evening, we had engaged a top-tier audit firm and drafted a communication strategy for our clients and stakeholders. Transparency would be our shield against any reputational fallout from my father's actions. Returning to my office after the final meeting, I found Marcus waiting. He looked different already. The designer, clothes replaced by a conservative business suit, his usual casual demeanor transformed into something more purposeful. "I've been reviewing grandfather's journal," he said, placing the leather-bound book on my desk. "There's an entry here from 1980, just after he faced a similar challenge from his own brother." I picked up the journal, turning to the marked page. "Today I had to choose between family loyalty and business integrity. Many would say this is an impossible choice, but they miss the point. True loyalty to family means upholding the principles that make that family strong. Sometimes the most loving act is to stand firm in what you know is right." Marcus sat down heavily in one of my office chairs. "I never understood before why you worked so hard, why you cared so much about doing things the right way. I always thought you were just trying to be perfect, to make the rest of us look bad." "And now?" I asked, watching his reflection in the window as the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "Now I'm starting to understand what grandfather meant about the weight of legacy. It's not just about money or success. It's about the principles you choose to live by, the impact you have on others." The sound of my phone interrupted us, another call from our parents. This time I answered, putting it on speaker. "Mother, father, I assume you're calling about the injunction." The speakerphone crackled with my father's authoritative voice, honed through decades of courtroom arguments. "Alexander, this injunction is your last chance to handle this matter. Within the family. Your brother's apparent change of heart doesn't negate our legitimate concerns about the trust's distribution." Marcus straightened in his chair, but I held up a hand, signaling him to wait. "Before we continue this discussion, you should know that you're on speaker. Marcus is here with me, and I've already engaged Palmer & Associates' compliance team regarding this situation." A sharp intake of breath from my mother's end of the line. You involved the firm? Alexander, how could you? This is a private family matter. Not anymore, I replied calmly, years of business negotiations serving me well. When you filed that injunction, you made this a legal matter. When you attempted to manipulate grandfather's trust through fraudulent means, you made it an ethical one. And when those actions potentially impacted the reputation of Palmer and Associates, you made it a business matter. You're overreacting, my father's lawyer voice took on a patronizing tone. The injunction merely requests judicial review of the trust's authority to implement this so-called legacy initiative. As your father and a senior partner in a respected law firm, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. I opened my laptop, bringing up the document Howard had sent earlier. Let me share some numbers with you. In the past 6 months, there were 17 unauthorized access attempts to grandfather's accounts from devices registered to your IP addresses, 15 successful transfers totaling $3 million were made to shell companies linked to Marcus's failed ventures, and 6 separate documents with forensically proven forged signatures were submitted to the trust. The silence on the other end was profound. Additionally, I continued, I've received confirmation that the State Bar Association would be very interested in reviewing these findings, particularly given your position as a managing partner at Palmer & Palmer LLC. Are you threatening me? My father's voice had lost its professional polish, revealing raw anger beneath. No, Father, I'm stating facts. Facts that will become public record if you proceed with this injunction. Howard's team has already prepared their response, including all supporting documentation. Once filed, it becomes accessible to the media, the Bar Association, and every client of both our firms. My mother's voice trembled as she spoke. Alexander, please. We only wanted to protect Marcus to ensure he had the same opportunities. The same opportunities I had? I interrupted. The opportunity to work my way up from intern to director? The opportunity to earn respect through merit rather than manipulation? Those opportunities were always available to Marcus. The difference is, now he's choosing to embrace them. Marcus leaned forward toward the speakerphone. Mom, Dad, Alex is right. What you did, what we did, was wrong. The legacy initiative isn't a punishment. It's a chance for me to earn my place in this family properly. This is absurd, my father snapped. We are your parents. We are not above the law, I completed firmly. You taught me that, remember? Along with the importance of ethical behavior and professional integrity. Or were those just words you used in client meetings? Sarah Chen chose that moment to enter my office, carrying a thick folder. She paused, assessing the situation, but I gestured for her to stay. You have a choice to make, I continued. Withdraw the injunction and accept that Marcus has chosen a different path, or proceed and face the consequences of your actions becoming public record. Either way, the legacy initiative moves forward. You would destroy this family's reputation? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. No, Mother. You put our reputation at risk when you chose to commit fraud. I'm offering a way to resolve this privately, through the proper channels Grandfather established. The choice of how this plays out rests with you. Sarah placed the folder on my desk, the preliminary findings of our internal review. The professional part of my brain noted how thoroughly she had documented everything, while the son in me grieved for the trust being broken. 24 hours, I stated clearly. That's how long you have to withdraw the injunction before Howard files the trust's response. I suggest you use this time to consider what matters more, your pride or your legacy. After ending the call, the office fell into heavy silence. Marcus stared out at the Seattle skyline, his reflection in the window overlaying the city lights, like a ghost of his former self. Sarah quietly took a seat, her presence offering professional support in this personal crisis. You know they won't accept this easily, Marcus finally said. They've spent too long believing they were right. I know, I acknowledged. But sometimes leadership means making difficult choices to uphold important principles. Grandfather understood that. Now it's our turn to prove we do too. The following morning brought a series of developments that elevated our family matter into a significant corporate governance issue. Sarah Chen arrived at my office before 7, carrying the preliminary findings from our compliance review. The documentation detailed not just the trust irregularities, but their potential implications for Palmer & Associates' regulatory standing. The SEC requires disclosure of any material events that could impact firm leadership or governance, Sarah explained, highlighting key sections of the report. Your father's involvement in the trust manipulation, given his position at Palmer & Palmer LLC and his historical connection to our firm, triggers several reporting requirements. I reviewed the findings carefully, noting how thoroughly Sarah's team had mapped the connections between the family trust issues and our corporate obligations. The Seattle morning fog pressed against my office windows, creating an appropriate atmosphere for such weighty deliberations. We need to get ahead of this, I decided, reaching for my phone. Contact the board members. I want an emergency session. This afternoon. They deserve to hear this directly from me before any external disclosures are required. Within hours, Palmer & Associates' board of directors convened in our main conference room. The gravity of the situation was reflected in their faces as they reviewed the documentation Sarah had prepared. These were seasoned business leaders who understood the stakes involved. Let me be clear, I addressed the board, standing at the head of the conference table. While these events originated as a family matter, I recognize their potential impact on our firm's reputation and operations. I'm requesting the board's approval for 3 immediate actions. The director's attention focused intently as I outlined my proposals. First, I want to engage an independent ethics counsel to review all transactions between Palmer & Associates and Palmer & Palmer LLC over the past 5 years. Second, I'm proposing the establishment of an enhanced compliance framework that goes beyond regulatory requirements. And third, I'm volunteering to step back from any decisions involving family-related business matters until this situation is resolved. Elizabeth Warner, our lead independent director, spoke first. Alexander, while I commend your proactive approach, this level of disclosure and review seems excessive for what is essentially a family trust dispute. With respect, Director Warner, I responded, this situation exemplifies why we need enhanced governance protocols. The intersection of family and business interests requires particular vigilance. If we expect our clients to trust us with their wealth management, we must demonstrate impeccable standards in managing our own. The discussion continued for several hours, delving into technical details and potential implications. As the board deliberated, my phone buzzed with a message from Howard. Your father's firm has withdrawn the injunction, but there's more. Call when you can. The board ultimately approved all 3 proposals, adding a 4th requirement. I would need to provide weekly updates on the situation's resolution. As the directors filed out, Elizabeth lingered behind. Your grandfather would be proud, she said quietly. He faced a similar crisis early in his chairmanship. Did you know that? I shook my head, intrigued. Elizabeth had served on the board since my grandfather's time, though I'd never heard this story. It was a different era, but the principles were the same, she continued. He had to choose between protecting family relationships and upholding corporate integrity. He chose integrity, knowing it might cost him personally. That decision established Palmer & Associates' reputation for ethical leadership. After the board meeting, I connected with Howard, who shared the latest development. Your father didn't just withdraw the injunction, he explained. He's announced his retirement from Palmer & Palmer LLC, effective immediately. The firm's executive committee is already implementing succession protocols. The news hit hard. My father had built his legal career over 4 decades, earning respect throughout the corporate law community. His sudden retirement would raise questions we couldn't easily answer. Later that afternoon, I found Marcus in his temporary office at Meridian Trust, surrounded by financial textbooks and analysis reports. The change in his appearance and demeanor continued to evolve, his focus evident in the notes spread across his desk. "I heard about Dad," he said as I entered. "Do you think he finally understood the magnitude of what they did, or is he just cutting losses?" "Perhaps both," I replied, taking in the transformation of my brother's workspace. "Sometimes, people need to lose something valuable to recognize the true cost of their choices." Marcus nodded, gesturing to a passage in our grandfather's journal. "I found something relevant here. After that crisis Elizabeth mentioned, Grandfather wrote, 'The hardest business decisions are those that force us to choose between personal comfort and professional principles.' But these moments define not just our careers, but our character." The wisdom of those words resonated deeply as we contemplated the changing landscape of our family's legacy. The withdrawal of the injunction and our father's retirement marked the end of one chapter, but the real work of rebuilding trust, both personal and professional, was just beginning. The aftermath of my father's retirement sent ripples through Seattle's business community. Palmer & Palmer LLC announced a comprehensive restructuring, while their major clients sought reassurances about continuity of service. The situation demanded careful navigation of both professional obligations and personal relationships. In the weeks that followed, I focused on implementing the enhanced compliance framework at Palmer & Associates. Sarah Chen's team worked diligently to establish new protocols that would prevent any future conflicts between family interests and corporate responsibilities. The experience was transforming our firm into a model of corporate governance. One morning, while reviewing the latest compliance reports, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Morrison, the managing partner of Morrison Global Investments, and one of our largest clients, arrived unannounced at my office. "I hope you don't mind the impromptu visit," she said, settling into a chair across from my desk. "But given recent events, I felt we needed to have a direct conversation about the future of our relationship." Patricia had been a close friend of my grandfather's, and her firm had been with Palmer & Associates since its inception. Her presence commanded attention, her decades of experience evident in her measured approach. "I've known 3 generations of Palmers," she continued, her gaze steady. "Your grandfather built this firm on a foundation of trust and integrity. When your father chose to focus on corporate law instead of joining the family business, many wondered if that foundation would weaken. But your grandfather never wavered in his belief that ethical leadership would prevail." She paused, examining the Seattle skyline through my office windows. "The business community is watching how you handle this situation, Alexander. Not just the trust issue or your father's retirement, but the broader question of corporate governance in family-controlled enterprises." "I understand," I replied, appreciating her directness. "That's why we've implemented comprehensive reforms that go beyond regulatory requirements. We're setting new standards for transparency and accountability." Patricia nodded approvingly. "I've reviewed your new compliance framework. It's impressive. But what interests me more is how you're handling the human element of this crisis." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a newspaper article from 20 years ago. The headline read, "Palmer & Associates sets industry standard for ethical investment management." "Your grandfather gave me this after we weathered the 2008 financial crisis together," she explained. "He told me something I've never forgotten. In times of crisis, market confidence can be rebuilt, financial losses can be recovered, but trust, once broken, requires extraordinary effort to restore." The wisdom of those words resonated deeply as I considered our current situation. The technical aspects of our corporate reforms were important, but rebuilding trust required more than new policies and procedures. "Which brings me to the real reason for my visit," Patricia continued. Morrison Global is preparing to launch a major initiative focused on sustainable investing and corporate responsibility. We're looking for a partner who not only understands the technical aspects, but embodies the principles of ethical leadership. Recent events have actually strengthened my confidence in Palmer and Associates. I looked at her questioningly, and she smiled. You could have handled the trust situation quietly, buried the evidence of manipulation, preserved appearances. Instead, you chose transparency and accountability, even at great personal cost. That's exactly the kind of leadership we want managing our clients' investments. As she outlined the details of the proposed initiative, I realized this was more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to transform our family crisis into a catalyst for positive change in the investment community. Later that day, I shared the news with Marcus during our weekly progress review at Meridian Trust. He had just completed his first month of the Legacy Initiative, and the changes were remarkable. His analysis of investment strategies showed genuine insight, and his questions about ethical decision-making reflected real growth. It's interesting, he mused, reviewing Patricia's proposal. A few months ago, I would have seen this only in terms of potential profit. Now I'm thinking about the responsibility that comes with managing other people's investments, about the impact our decisions have on their lives. Howard, who had joined us for the review, smiled approvingly. That's exactly the kind of perspective. Your grandfather hoped this program would develop. He believed that true wealth management was about more than just growing assets. It was about growing wisdom. As we discussed the details of Morrison Global's initiative, I received an email from Sarah Chen. The Independent Ethics Council had completed their review of past transactions between our firms. While they found no additional irregularities, their recommendations for future governance would further strengthen our compliance framework. The Morrison Global Initiative launched on a crisp autumn morning, 3 months after our family crisis began. The Seattle financial district buzzed with anticipation as industry leaders gathered in Palmer and Associates' main conference center for the announcement. The event marked more than just a new business partnership. It represented a fundamental shift in how our industry approached ethical governance. Patricia Morrison opened the proceedings with a compelling vision for the future of sustainable investing. As I listened from my seat on the panel, I reflected on how our recent experiences had positioned us perfectly for this moment. The enhanced compliance framework we had developed in response to our family crisis was now becoming a model for the entire industry. Today, we're not just announcing a new investment strategy, Patricia declared to the assembled executives and media representatives. We're establishing new standards for corporate responsibility and ethical leadership in wealth management. The presentation that followed detailed how Palmer and Associates would help implement these standards across Morrison Global's portfolio companies. Our approach combined rigorous financial analysis with innovative governance protocols, many derived from the lessons we had learned during our own transformation. During the Q&A session, a reporter from the Financial Times raised the question everyone had been anticipating. Mr. Palmer, given the recent changes in your family's business interests, how can investors be confident in your firm's ability to manage this initiative? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. 3 months ago, such a question might have seemed threatening. Now, it presented an opportunity to demonstrate the power of transparent leadership. Recent events in our family business have indeed prompted significant changes, I acknowledged, maintaining steady eye contact with the reporter. We chose to view these challenges as an opportunity to strengthen our governance structures and reaffirm our commitment to ethical leadership. The protocols we've developed, which we'll be implementing across this initiative, were forged in the crucible of real-world experience. Sarah Chen, seated beside me, smoothly added details about our enhanced compliance framework. The reporter's follow-up questions revealed genuine interest in how our personal experience had shaped our professional systems. After the formal presentation, Elizabeth Warner approached me. Your grandfather would have appreciated the symmetry of this moment, she observed. Using a family challenge to create industry-wide positive change. It's exactly what he did during his own crisis. She handed me a leather portfolio I recognized from my grandfather's office. I've been holding onto this since he asked me to serve as a trustee. Inside is his personal account of how he transformed Palmer & Associates during the financial crisis of the 1980s. He wanted you to have it when the time was right. Later that evening, I shared the portfolio's contents with Marcus during our weekly review session. My brother had just completed his first quarter in the Legacy Initiative, and his progress reports showed remarkable development. The executive education program had awakened a genuine passion for ethical business practices I had never seen in him before. "Listen to this," I said, reading from our grandfather's account. "The true test of leadership isn't avoiding crises. It's using them to create lasting positive change. Every challenge presents an opportunity to strengthen not just our operations, but our character." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, his expression reflecting the maturity he had gained. It's interesting how his words keep finding us exactly when we need them most. The Legacy Initiative isn't just about learning business principles. It's about understanding why those principles matter. Our discussion was interrupted by an alert from Sarah's team. The independent auditors had completed their review of the Morrison Global Implementation Plan, and their report exceeded expectations. Our new governance protocols were not just meeting industry standards, they were setting new benchmarks for ethical wealth management. The notification reminded me of a meeting scheduled for the following day, the first quarterly review of our enhanced compliance framework with the board of directors. The preliminary data showed significant improvements in operational efficiency, risk management, and client satisfaction. The quarterly board review revealed unprecedented growth in client confidence and market trust. Our enhanced compliance framework had not only strengthened internal operations, but had attracted attention from regulatory bodies interested in adopting similar standards across the industry. As I presented the results to the board, I could sense a shift in the atmosphere. What had begun as a response to crisis had evolved into a catalyst for industry-wide transformation. Elizabeth Warner, speaking on behalf of the independent directors, highlighted how our transparency during the family trust situation had enhanced our credibility with institutional investors. "The market recognizes authentic leadership," she noted, reviewing the client acquisition data. "Your decision to confront the trust issues openly has positioned Palmer & Associates as a benchmark for corporate governance." The discussion turned to the Morrison Global Initiative's early results. The sustainable investing framework we had developed was showing promising returns while maintaining rigorous ethical standards. Several other major investment firms had expressed interest in adopting our governance protocols. Following the board meeting, Howard requested my presence at Meridian Trust for an unexpected development. Arriving at his office, I found Marcus, already there, his demeanor reflecting the professional growth he had achieved through the Legacy Initiative. "We've received communication from your parents," Howard began, his expression carefully neutral. "They've been monitoring the changes at Palmer & Associates and the industry response to our enhanced governance framework. Your father, in particular, has spent considerable time reviewing the situation since his retirement." Howard handed me a formal letter, written on my father's personal stationery. The contents were unexpected. "Dear Alexander and Marcus, the past months have provided ample time for reflection on my actions and their implications. Watching the transformation of Palmer & Associates under Alexander's leadership and Marcus's commitment to personal growth through the Legacy Initiative has forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own choices. Your grandfather often spoke about the difference between managing wealth and building legacy. I realize now that in attempting to manipulate his trust, I betrayed not just his wishes, but the principles he spent a lifetime establishing. The enhanced compliance framework you've implemented at Palmer & Associates represents everything I should have championed in my own legal career. Your mother and I have decided to take steps to make amends." We are establishing a foundation focused on promoting ethical leadership in business, funded entirely from our personal resources. We understand if trust cannot be immediately restored. However, we hope our actions moving forward will demonstrate genuine commitment to the values your grandfather always emphasized. With respect and regret, Dad. The silence following my reading of the letter was profound. Marcus studied the Seattle skyline through Howard's window, his expression thoughtful. "They're finally beginning to understand," he said quietly. "It was never about the money. It was about the principles." Howard nodded, retrieving another document from his desk. "Your grandfather anticipated something like this." In his private papers, he left a note about the transformative power of ethical crisis. He believed that true change often requires confronting our own failures. The note, written in our grandfather's distinctive hand, read, "The greatest inheritance we leave is not measured in dollars, but in the principles we uphold. Sometimes those we love must lose their way before they can truly understand this truth." Later that evening, reviewing the day's developments with Sarah Chen, I shared my thoughts on this unexpected turn of events. "We've created something beyond what I initially envisioned," I admitted. "The crisis forced us to examine every aspect of our operations, but the changes we implemented have become a model for others," Sarah agreed, presenting the latest industry analysis. "The financial sector is evolving," she observed. "Firms are recognizing that ethical governance isn't just about compliance. It's about creating sustainable value. Your handling of the family trust situation demonstrated that transparency and accountability ultimately strengthen market confidence." 6 months after implementing our enhanced compliance framework, Palmer & Associates hosted the inaugural Ethical Leadership Summit. The event brought together industry leaders, regulatory experts, and academic professionals to discuss the future of corporate governance. Our main conference center buzzed with energy as participants explored how principled leadership could drive sustainable business success. Patricia Morrison delivered the keynote address, using our partnership as a case study in organizational transformation. "The true measure of leadership," she explained, "isn't just navigating through crisis, but using that experience to create lasting positive change." Palmer & Associates has demonstrated how personal integrity and professional excellence can align to create exceptional value. During the morning sessions, I participated in a panel discussion about family-owned businesses and corporate governance. The moderator asked about the challenges of maintaining ethical standards across generations. My response drew from our recent experiences. Sustainable success requires more than just financial acumen. It demands a commitment to principles that transcend individual interests. Our enhanced governance framework wasn't just a response to crisis. It became a catalyst for industry-wide improvement. Marcus, who had completed his first 6 months of the Legacy Initiative, joined me for the afternoon presentations. His transformation had exceeded all expectations. The executive education program had not only developed his business skills, but had fundamentally shifted his perspective on wealth management and corporate responsibility. Between sessions, Howard shared some remarkable statistics. The implementation of our governance protocols across Morrison Global's portfolio companies had resulted in measurable improvements in operational efficiency, risk management, and stakeholder trust. Several major investment firms had already adopted similar frameworks, creating a ripple effect throughout the industry. Sarah Chen presented findings from our latest compliance review, highlighting how our transparent approach had strengthened client relationships. "When we chose to address the trust situation openly," she noted, "some worried it would damage market confidence. Instead, it enhanced our credibility and set new standards for corporate accountability." The summit's afternoon focus turned to the future of ethical investing. Elizabeth Warner moderated a discussion about integrating governance principles into investment strategies. "The market is evolving," she observed. Investors increasingly recognize that long-term value creation requires strong ethical foundations. During a brief break, I received an unexpected message. My parents had made their first public statement since establishing their foundation for ethical leadership. Their commitment to promoting corporate responsibility seemed genuine, reflecting a deep understanding of the principles they had once undermined. The day concluded with an evening reception where informal discussions continued among industry leaders. Patricia Morrison approached me with news that validated our approach. The Regulatory Commission is considering adopting elements of your compliance framework as industry standards, she revealed. Your response to a family crisis may end up reshaping the entire financial sector. Later that evening, reviewing the day's events with Marcus in my office, we discovered another note from our grandfather, carefully preserved in his journal. His words seemed particularly relevant to our journey. The greatest challenge in business isn't achieving success. It's ensuring that success serves a greater purpose. True wealth isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by the positive change we create. Sometimes, the most valuable inheritance we receive isn't money or property, but the wisdom to use our resources responsibly. The Seattle skyline glittered beyond my office windows as Marcus shared his perspectives on the Legacy Initiative's impact. When this all started, he reflected, I saw it as a punishment, a way to control my access to the trust. Now I understand. It was about preparing us to be responsible stewards of not just wealth, but principles. 1 year after Howard Richardson's discovery of the trust manipulation, Palmer and Associates had evolved into a benchmark for corporate governance in the financial sector. The quarterly review meeting with our board of directors revealed unprecedented growth in both client assets and industry influence. Our enhanced compliance framework had become a model studied by business schools and emulated by competing firms. Sarah Chen presented the annual performance metrics, highlighting how our commitment to transparency had strengthened market confidence. The numbers tell a compelling story, she explained, directing the board's attention to the detailed analysis. Client retention has increased by 38%, while new account acquisitions have doubled. More significantly, our governance protocols have been adopted by 17 major financial institutions. Elizabeth Warner, who had witnessed the firm's evolution since my grandfather's era, offered historical perspective. What distinguishes this transformation is its sustainability, she observed. We're not just seeing improved financial performance, we're experiencing a fundamental shift in how the market views ethical leadership. The morning's discussion was interrupted by an urgent message from Patricia Morrison. Morrison Global's board had unanimously voted to expand our partnership, implementing our governance framework across their entire international portfolio. The decision would influence investment practices in markets worldwide. Following the board meeting, I met with Marcus at Meridian Trust for his final Legacy Initiative review. His transformation over the past year had exceeded all expectations. The executive education program had developed not just his business acumen but his understanding of ethical leadership's vital role in sustainable success. Howard shared the comprehensive evaluation of Marcus's progress. Your grandfather would be particularly proud of this moment, he noted, reviewing the detailed assessments. The Legacy Initiative was never solely about financial management. It was designed to develop principled leadership capabilities. Marcus's final project had focused on integrating ethical governance principles into emerging market investments. His analysis demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how corporate responsibility could drive sustainable growth in developing economies. The work had already attracted attention from international development organizations. As we reviewed his achievements, Howard revealed another document from our grandfather's private papers. The letter, dated shortly before his passing, outlined his vision for the family's future. My dear grandsons, leadership in finance carries profound responsibility. Each decision we make affects not just balance sheets, but people's lives and aspirations. the true measure of our success lies not in the wealth we accumulate, but in the positive change we create. The Legacy Initiative was designed not as a test, but as a gift, an opportunity to understand that ethical leadership and business success are inseparable. In times of challenge, remember that our greatest inheritance is not the assets we manage, but the principles we uphold. Build upon this foundation. Let integrity guide your decisions. Create value that extends beyond financial returns. Most importantly, remember that true legacy lies in how we influence others to embrace these principles. With faith in your potential, grandfather. The wisdom of his words resonated deeply as we discussed the future. Marcus had received offers from several prestigious firms but had chosen to stay with Palmer and Associates, accepting a role focused on developing ethical investment strategies for emerging markets. That evening, reviewing the day's developments with Sarah, we examined the broader implications of our organizational transformation. The industry is at a turning point, she observed, sharing recent regulatory communications. Your grandfather's principles, embedded in our enhanced governance framework, are reshaping how financial institutions approach corporate responsibility. The Seattle sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues as we discussed upcoming initiatives. Our compliance protocols were being adapted for different market contexts, while maintaining their core emphasis on transparency and accountability. The impact extended beyond our immediate industry, influencing corporate governance practices across sectors. 18 months after our family crisis began, Palmer and Associates hosted an international symposium on ethical governance in partnership with the World Economic Forum. The event, held in our expanded Seattle headquarters, brought together financial leaders from 23 countries to explore how principled leadership could address global economic challenges. The morning began with an unexpected announcement. The International Financial Regulatory Commission had selected our enhanced compliance framework as the foundation for new global standards in wealth management. Sarah Chen, presenting the implementation strategy, emphasized how our experience had demonstrated the universal applicability of ethical governance principles. What began as a response to a family trust crisis has evolved into a blueprint for industry transformation, Sarah explained to the assembled delegates. The framework's success lies in its ability to align business performance with social responsibility, creating sustainable value across diverse market contexts. During the IEI mid-morning session, Patricia Morrison shared compelling data from Morrison Global's international portfolio. The implementation of our governance protocols had yielded remarkable results: improved risk management, enhanced stakeholder trust, and sustainable growth across emerging markets. Most significantly, the framework had proven adaptable to different cultural and regulatory environments. Marcus, now leading our Emerging Markets Initiative, presented a case study on ethical investment in developing economies. His analysis revealed how principled leadership could drive both financial returns and social progress. The transformation in his approach to business was evident in every aspect of his presentation. Sustainable success requires more than financial expertise, he explained, addressing questions from international delegates. It demands understanding how ethical decisions impact communities and shape market development. Our experience has shown that principled leadership creates lasting value across cultural boundaries. Elizabeth Warner, moderating the afternoon panel on corporate governance evolution, highlighted the broader implications of our journey. The Palmer legacy demonstrates how personal integrity and professional excellence can catalyze systemic change, she observed. This framework isn't just about compliance, it's about creating a new paradigm for global business leadership. Howard Richardson, joining us for the symposium, shared insights from his long experience in trust management. What distinguishes this approach is its emphasis on character development alongside technical expertise, he noted. The Legacy Initiative's success in transforming individual perspective has proven essential to implementing lasting organizational change. The day's discussions were enriched by participation from an unexpected quarter. My parents' foundation for ethical leadership had begun showing meaningful impact in business education. Their commitment to promoting corporate responsibility had evolved from personal redemption into genuine contribution to industry transformation. During an afternoon break, I received news that validated our approach's global relevance. A consortium of Asian investment firms had requested our assistance in adapting the framework for their regional context. The opportunity to influence ethical business practices across diverse markets aligned perfectly with my grandfather's vision of principled leadership. The evening session focused on future challenges in global finance. Sarah presented research on emerging technologies and their implications for ethical governance. As markets become more interconnected and complex, she explained, maintaining principled leadership becomes increasingly crucial. Our framework provides a foundation for addressing these evolving challenges. Later that night, reviewing the day's proceedings with Marcus in our grandfather's former office, we discovered another note in his personal papers. The message seemed particularly relevant to our global expansion. The principles of ethical leadership transcend borders and cultures. True success in global finance requires understanding that integrity is a universal language. Each market may have unique characteristics, but the fundamental values of transparency, accountability, and responsible stewardship remain constant. Build bridges through principled leadership. Let your commitment to ethical governance inspire others to embrace higher standards. Remember that in an interconnected world, the impact of our decisions extends far beyond immediate financial results. 2 years after Howard Richardson's discovery of the trust manipulation, Palmer and Associates prepared to mark a significant milestone. The enhanced compliance framework had been adopted by over 100 financial institutions worldwide, transforming industry standards for ethical governance. As we gathered for a special board meeting to discuss our expanding global influence, I reflected on how far we'd come from those tense days of family crisis. The morning began with an unprecedented announcement. The Global Financial Ethics Commission had selected Palmer and Associates to lead an international task force on corporate governance innovation. Sarah Chen, presenting the initiative's scope, emphasized how our journey from family crisis to industry leadership had positioned us uniquely for this role. What we've created extends beyond traditional compliance, Sarah explained to the board. We've demonstrated that ethical leadership isn't just about following rules. It's about setting new standards that elevate entire industries. Our framework has proven that principled decision-making drives sustainable success. Elizabeth Warner, who had witnessed our transformation from the beginning, shared a personal observation. Your grandfather once told me that true inheritance isn't measured in assets but in impact, she recalled. He would be particularly proud to see how you've transformed a challenging situation into a catalyst for positive change. The discussion was enriched by Marcus's presentation on our Emerging Markets program's results. His leadership had helped establish ethical investment protocols in developing economies, creating sustainable growth opportunities while maintaining strict governance standards. The contrast between his current work and his past ventures highlighted the profound nature of his personal transformation. Understanding came gradually, Marcus admitted, addressing the board. The Legacy Initiative taught me that sustainable success requires more than just financial acumen. It demands a commitment to principles that benefit not just ourselves, but the broader community. During the lunch break, Howard arrived with remarkable news. In reviewing old trust documents, he had discovered additional papers from our grandfather, intended to be shared at this precise moment in our development. The timing seemed almost prescient, as if he had anticipated the journey we would take. The document, written in his distinctive hand, read, "My dear grandsons, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered the true purpose of the trust, not to simply preserve wealth, but to develop character. The challenges you faced were, in part, by design. I believed that testing circumstances would either reveal or build strength of character. The apparent inequity in the trust's distribution wasn't about favoritism. It was about creating a situation that would force both of you to confront fundamental questions about value, justice, and responsibility. Alexander's portion wasn't a reward for following my path, but a test of his commitment to ethical leadership. Marcus's restricted access wasn't punishment, but an opportunity to discover the importance of earning success through principled effort. The Legacy Initiative wasn't merely a program for professional development. It was designed to demonstrate how ethical decisions create lasting value. Your mother and father's potential interference was something I anticipated, not because I doubted their integrity, but because I understood how protecting family can sometimes lead us to compromise our principles. What you've built in response to these challenges has exceeded my hopes. You've transformed a family crisis into an opportunity for industry-wide improvement. You've demonstrated that ethical leadership and business success aren't opposing forces, but essential partners. Remember that the true test of leadership isn't in avoiding challenges, but in how we respond to them. Each crisis presents an opportunity to strengthen not just our operations, but our character. The principles you've now embraced and expanded will continue to influence business practices long after the details of the trust dispute are forgotten. Your greatest inheritance isn't the wealth you'll receive, but the wisdom you've gained. Use it well. Continue to build upon this foundation. Let your experience guide others toward understanding that sustainable success requires unwavering commitment to ethical principles. With pride in your achievements and faith in your future, grandfather. The room fell silent as I finished reading. The wisdom of his words resonated deeply, reflecting how thoroughly he had understood the challenges and opportunities we would face. The evening following our grandfather's final letter revelation, Marcus and I stood in my office, watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. The city skyline had witnessed our entire journey, from the initial crisis through our transformation into industry leaders. Now, with our grandfather's ultimate message still resonating, we face the future with new understanding. Looking back, Marcus reflected, every challenge was a carefully crafted lesson. Even our parents' interference served a purpose, teaching us that principles matter more than convenience. The next morning brought an unexpected opportunity. The Global Financial Summit had requested both Palmer & Associates and Meridian Trust to lead a special initiative on next-generation leadership development. The program would adapt our experiences into a framework for developing ethical business leaders worldwide. Sarah Chen, reviewing the proposal, highlighted its transformative potential. This isn't just about sharing our story, she explained. It's about creating a systematic approach to developing principled leadership across cultures and markets. Howard joined us for the planning session, bringing additional insights from his long experience in trust management. Your grandfather's approach was unique, he observed. He understood that character development requires both challenge and opportunity. This program could extend that wisdom to a new generation of leaders. Patricia Morrison arrived with compelling data from the first wave of institutions that had adopted our governance framework. The results exceeded all projections: improved risk management, enhanced stakeholder trust, and sustainable growth across diverse markets. More significantly, these institutions were now developing their own initiatives to promote ethical leadership. You've created something remarkable, Patricia noted. Not just a compliance framework, but a movement toward more principled business practices. The ripple effects will influence the industry for generations. During lunch, Elizabeth Warner shared a story she had never told before. Your grandfather faced a similar crossroads in 1979, she revealed. A major client proposed a highly profitable but ethically questionable venture. He chose principles over profit, losing the client but setting a standard that attracted even more business long-term. He always said that decision defined Palmer and Associates' character. The afternoon brought news that validated our approach's lasting impact. The International Business Ethics Committee had selected our governance framework as the foundation for new global standards in wealth management. Our family crisis had evolved into a catalyst for industry-wide transformation. As we prepared for the next phase of our work, I received an unexpected visit from our parents. Their foundation for ethical leadership had begun showing remarkable results in business education. More importantly, their perspective had fundamentally shifted. "We've learned so much from watching your journey," my father admitted. "What we once saw as rigid adherence to principles, we now understand as visionary leadership. Your grandfather's true legacy wasn't the wealth he created, but the values he instilled." Looking toward the future, Marcus and I developed plans to expand the Legacy Initiative globally. The program would adapt to different cultural contexts while maintaining its core emphasis on character development and ethical decision-making. "The principles remain constant," Marcus explained to our implementation team. "Integrity, accountability, and responsible stewardship are universal values. Our task is to show how they create sustainable success in any context." That evening, reviewing our progress with Sarah and Howard, we discovered one final note from our grandfather, tucked away in his journal. "The greatest achievements in business aren't measured by quarterly profits or market share. They're measured by the positive change we create, the principles we uphold, and the legacy we leave for future generations. Remember that each decision you make ripples beyond the immediate outcome. Choose wisdom over expedience, integrity over convenience, and long-term value over short-term gain. Most importantly, understand that your greatest influence comes not from the position you hold, but from the principles you demonstrate. The future belongs to those who understand that ethical leadership isn't a constraint on success. It's the foundation of lasting achievement. Build upon this truth. Expand its influence. Create a legacy that inspires others to choose principle over profit, wisdom over convenience, and character over compromise. Your journey has only begun. Use what you've learned to light the way for others. The true measure of your success will be the positive change you create in the lives and organizations you touch. With eternal faith in your potential, grandfather. As the Seattle night settled around us, Marcus and I contemplated the path ahead. Our grandfather's crisis had become our opportunity. His principles had become our foundation, and his vision for ethical leadership had become our mission. The hidden inheritance wasn't just about money or property. It was about understanding that true wealth lies in the principles we uphold and the positive change we create. As we looked toward the future, we knew that our real work was just beginning, transforming this understanding into lasting impact for generations to come. 3 years after our initial family crisis, Palmer and Associates faced an unprecedented opportunity that would test our commitment to ethical leadership in ways we hadn't imagined. A major international conglomerate, facing its own governance crisis, approached us to lead their organizational transformation. This wasn't just another consulting project, it was a chance to implement our principles on a global scale. The situation echoed our own past challenges, but with far greater complexity. The conglomerate, Global Venture Partners, GVP, had operations in 37 countries and employed over 100,000 people. Their CEO, Richard Chang, had personally reached out after witnessing our presentation at the World Economic Forum. "Your story resonated deeply with me," Chang explained during our initial meeting in the Palmer and Associates boardroom. "We've grown rapidly through acquisitions, but our governance hasn't kept pace. We need more than just compliance protocols. We need a fundamental shift in organizational culture." Sarah Chen's preliminary analysis revealed the magnitude of the challenge. GVP's decentralized structure had led to inconsistent ethical standards across different regions. Some divisions maintained rigorous compliance, while others operated in regulatory gray areas. This is different from our previous implementations, Sarah noted during our strategy session. We're not just adapting our framework, we're scaling it to address systemic issues across multiple business cultures. Marcus, who had been leading our emerging markets initiative, saw unique potential in the situation. Each challenge we faced in our own transformation prepared us for this moment, he observed. We're not just consultants offering solutions, we're partners who've walked this path ourselves. The project would require unprecedented cooperation between Palmer and Associates and Meridian Trust. Howard Richardson's experience in managing complex transitions would be crucial for success. Your grandfather always said that the true test of principles comes when scaling them, Howard reminded us. Elizabeth Warner, who had joined our project steering committee, provided valuable historical perspective. In 1983, your grandfather faced a similar inflection point, she shared. A major international client wanted to implement his investment principles across their portfolio. He knew that saying yes meant either compromising his standards or transforming an entire organization. He chose transformation, even though it meant years of challenging work. As we developed our implementation strategy, Patricia Morrison offered crucial insights from Morrison Global's experience. The key is maintaining ethical consistency while respecting local business cultures, she advised. Your framework succeeds because it adapts universal principles to specific contexts. The scope of the project sparked intense debate within our leadership team. Some worried that taking on such a massive transformation might dilute our own standards. Others saw it as the natural evolution of our mission to promote ethical business practices globally. During one particularly challenging strategy session, I discovered another note from our grandfather. This one addressed specifically to future generations of Palmer leadership. The principles of ethical business aren't meant to be kept within our walls. True leadership means sharing wisdom that can benefit others. When opportunities arise to expand your influence, remember that growth should never compromise integrity. Instead, let integrity drive growth. The greatest challenge in scaling ethical leadership is maintaining its essential character while adapting its expression to new contexts. Each culture, each organization, each situation presents unique challenges. The key is understanding that while methods may vary, principles remain constant. Don't fear expansion that serves a greater purpose. Let each new challenge become an opportunity to demonstrate how ethical leadership creates sustainable value. Your influence grows not through imposition of standards, but through demonstration of their universal benefit. The wisdom of his words helped shape our approach to the GVP transformation. We developed a phased implementation plan that would respect local business practices while gradually elevating governance standards across the organization. The implementation of our ethical governance framework at Global Venture Partners revealed new dimensions of leadership challenge. Cultural differences, entrenched practices, and organizational resistance tested our commitment to maintaining standards while achieving meaningful change. Our first major hurdle emerged in GVP's Asian operations. Traditional business practices in the region often prioritized relationships and informal agreements over documented protocols. During our initial assessment in Singapore, we encountered pushback from local management who viewed our transparency requirements as potentially disruptive to established business networks. Sarah Chen, whose background bridged Eastern and Western business cultures, proved invaluable in navigating these challenges. We're not asking them to abandon their business culture, she explained during our strategy review. We're showing how ethical governance can enhance, rather than replace, traditional relationships. The breakthrough came during a crucial meeting with regional directors in Hong Kong. Marcus, drawing from his emerging markets experience, shared how our framework had actually strengthened business relationships in other Asian markets by building trust through transparency. Consider how your most valued business relationships are built on trust, he told the assembled executives. Our governance framework simply provides a structure for demonstrating and maintaining that trust. It's not about replacing relationship-based business. It's about protecting and enhancing it. His presentation included case studies from our work with Morrison Global, showing how ethical governance had improved both performance and stakeholder relationships across different cultural contexts. The data spoke powerfully. Companies that had adopted our framework showed significant improvements in both financial performance and business relationship stability. Richard Chang, GVP's CEO, shared an unexpected perspective during our progress review. When we first approached Palmer & Associates, I thought we needed technical solutions, better compliance systems, stronger controls. Now I understand we're really talking about universal principles expressed through local practices. Howard Richardson, joining us for the quarterly assessment, brought historical insight to our approach. Your grandfather faced similar challenges when expanding internationally, he revealed. He discovered that while expression might vary, core principles of integrity and responsibility resonated across cultures. The transformation process revealed something remarkable. Despite surface differences, business leaders across cultures shared common aspirations for building sustainable, trustworthy organizations. Our framework provided a structure for achieving these aspirations while respecting local business practices. Elizabeth Warner, who had been monitoring the implementation from a board perspective, noted the parallel with our own family's journey. Just as your family crisis revealed deeper truths about principle-based leadership, this global expansion is showing how universal values can unite diverse business cultures. As we progressed, we discovered that resistance often masked a deeper hunger for ethical clarity. During a particularly challenging session with European operations directors, one senior executive made a striking admission. We've been waiting for permission to prioritize principles over short-term profits. Your framework gives us that permission. The project also forced us to examine and enhance our own practices. Each challenge we encountered led to refinements in our approach, making the framework more adaptable while maintaining its core principles. Sarah's team developed new modules specifically addressing cultural adaptation while preserving ethical standards. During this period, I found another note from our grandfather, this one specifically addressing international expansion. The principles of ethical business transcend cultural boundaries because they speak to universal human values: trust, respect, responsibility. The challenge isn't in whether these principles apply, but in how they're expressed in different contexts. When expanding ethical governance globally, remember that true leadership listens before it speaks, understands before it acts. Each culture has its own wisdom about building trust and maintaining integrity. Your task is to show how formal governance can enhance, rather than replace, these traditional values. The most powerful transformations occur when people recognize familiar values in new forms. Let your framework be a bridge between traditional wisdom and modern business needs. Show how ethical governance strengthens rather than weakens valued business relationships. Most importantly, remember that lasting change comes through demonstration rather than dictation. Let your success inspire others to embrace higher standards voluntarily. The greatest testament to your principles will be their willing adoption by those who initially resisted them. 4 years after our initial family crisis, the transformation we had initiated was creating waves of change far beyond our original vision. The successful implementation of our ethical governance framework at Global Venture Partners had caught the attention of international regulatory bodies and policymakers. Our approach to principled leadership was reshaping conversations about corporate responsibility on a global scale. On a crisp autumn morning in Seattle, we hosted an unprecedented gathering of financial leaders, regulatory officials, and academic experts. The purpose: to examine how our experience could inform new standards for international business governance. The event marked a turning point in our journey from family crisis to global influence. What began as a response to personal challenge has evolved into a movement for organizational transformation, Sarah Chen observed in her opening remarks. We're seeing evidence that ethical governance isn't just morally right, it's economically advantageous across diverse market contexts. The data supported her assertion. Companies that had adopted our framework showed remarkable improvements not just in compliance metrics, but in operational efficiency, market trust, and sustainable growth. The pattern held true across different industries and cultural contexts. Marcus, who had become a recognized authority on ethical business practices in emerging markets, presented compelling research on how principled leadership created competitive advantages. When we align organizational values with universal principles, he explained, we create resilience that transcends market fluctuations. Richard Chang from GVP shared their transformation experience, highlighting how our framework had strengthened, rather than weakened their business relationships across Asia. We discovered that ethical governance enhances traditional business values, he noted. It provides structure for demonstrating the trust that has always been fundamental to successful business. Patricia Morrison presented findings from a YE-AID comprehensive study of firms using our governance protocols. The results were striking: improved risk management, enhanced stakeholder confidence, and sustainable growth across diverse markets. More significantly, these organizations were developing their own initiatives to promote ethical leadership. During the afternoon sessions, Howard Richardson shared insights from our journey that particularly resonated with international audiences. The power of this approach, he explained, lies in its ability to unite universal principles with local business practices. It's not about imposing standards, it's about elevating existing values. Elizabeth Warner, who had witnessed our evolution from family business to global influencer, offered historical perspective. This transformation echoes what your grandfather always envisioned, she told the assembled leaders. He believed that ethical business practices would eventually become not just admired, but essential for sustainable success. The event also marked a milestone in our family's journey. My parents, whose foundation for ethical leadership had gained international recognition, participated as speakers. Their perspective on personal transformation added depth to discussions about organizational change. We learned through experience that principles aren't constraints. They're foundations for sustainable success, my father shared. What we once saw as impediments to profit have proven to be catalysts for lasting value creation. As the eighth day progressed, we received news that would further expand our influence. The International Standards Organization had selected our governance framework as the basis for new global guidelines in corporate ethics. Our family's crisis had evolved into a blueprint for industry transformation. During a brief break, I discovered a final note from our grandfather, tucked into his old conference room chair. The true measure of leadership isn't in the changes we make directly, but in the transformations we inspire others to embrace. When principles become practice, when values drive decisions, when integrity shapes strategy, that's when real change begins. Remember that each ethical choice creates ripples far beyond its immediate impact. Today's principled decision becomes tomorrow's industry standard. Today's stand for integrity becomes tomorrow's benchmark for success. Your greatest contribution won't be in the wealth you manage or the protocols you establish, but in the examples you set and the changes you inspire. Let your commitment to principle-based leadership encourage others to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. The future belongs to those who understand that ethical leadership isn't just about following rules. It's about setting standards that elevate entire industries. Build on this truth, expand its influence, create legacies that inspire others to choose principle over expedience, wisdom over convenience, and character over compromise. 5 years had passed since Howard Richardson's discovery of the trust manipulation. On a clear Seattle morning, as I prepared for a landmark announcement at Palmer & Associates, I reflected on how thoroughly our grandfather's hidden inheritance had transformed not just our family, but the entire landscape of global business ethics. The announcement would introduce the Palmer Global Initiative for Ethical Leadership, a revolutionary program that would extend our governance framework into new territories and industries. Backed by a consortium of international organizations and supported by regulatory bodies worldwide, the initiative represented the culmination of our journey from family crisis to global influence. Sarah Chen, now Chief Ethics Officer for our expanded international operations, had prepared comprehensive data demonstrating the impact of our approach. Companies adopting our framework have shown average performance improvements of 47% across key metrics, she reported during our final review. More importantly, they're maintaining these improvements over time, proving the sustainability of ethical governance. Marcus, who had grown into a respected authority on ethical business practices, would lead the initiative's emerging markets division. His personal transformation from ambitious entrepreneur to principled leader had become a powerful testament to the effectiveness of our approach. When I look back at who I was 5 years ago, he shared during our morning meeting, I barely recognize that person. The Legacy Initiative didn't just change my approach to business, it transformed my understanding of success itself. The morning's proceedings began with an unexpected tribute. Richard Chang, whose implementation of our framework at Global Venture Partners had become a model for international corporations, presented findings from a 5-year study of organizations using our governance protocols. The data tells an extraordinary story, Chang explained to the assembled leaders. Companies committed to ethical governance aren't just surviving market challenges. They're setting new standards for sustainable success. The Palmer framework has proven that principled leadership creates lasting value across all cultural contexts. Patricia Morrison, whose partnership had been crucial in our early expansion, revealed how our approach had influenced investment strategies globally. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how markets value corporate governance, she noted. Ethical leadership isn't just preferred, it's becoming essential for long-term success. Howard Richardson, who had witnessed our entire journey, shared a perspective that captured the magnitude of our transformation. What began as a family trust issue has evolved into a movement for global business reform, he observed. Your grandfather's principles have proven more powerful than even he might have imagined. The afternoon brought another significant moment. My parents, whose foundation had become a leading voice in business ethics education, announced a major expansion of their programs. Their journey from manipulating trust documents to championing ethical leadership highlighted the transformative power of principled decision-making. We learned through difficult experience that true success isn't measured by financial gains alone, my father acknowledged. It's measured by the positive change we create and the principles we uphold. Elizabeth Warner, speaking on behalf of our board, provided historical context that emphasized the significance of our journey. In 1975, your grandfather faced a choice between expedient profit and principled leadership, she revealed. His decision to prioritize ethics over easy gains set Palmer and Associates on a path that would eventually transform global business practices. As the day progressed, we received news that further validated our approach. The World Economic Forum had selected our governance framework as the foundation for a new global standard in corporate ethics. Our family's crisis had evolved into a blueprint for industry transformation worldwide. During a quiet moment between sessions, Marcus and I discovered one final message from our grandfather, sealed in an envelope marked, "To be opened when the true inheritance is understood." My dear grandsons, if you're reading this, you've discovered that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in impact. The challenges you faced weren't just tests of character. They were opportunities to demonstrate how principled leadership creates lasting value. The true purpose of wealth isn't accumulation, but transformation. Each decision you make, each standard you set, Each principle you uphold creates ripples that influence countless lives and organizations. Your greatest legacy won't be the assets you manage, but the changes you inspire others to embrace. Remember that ethical leadership isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about transforming them into opportunities for positive change. Let each crisis become a catalyst for improvement. Let each challenge strengthen your commitment to principle-based decision-making. The future belongs to those who understand that sustainable success requires unwavering integrity. Build on this truth. Expand its influence. Create legacies that inspire others to choose wisdom over expedience, principle over profit, and character over compromise. Most importantly, remember that the work of ethical leadership is never complete. Each generation must find new ways to apply timeless principles to emerging challenges. Your journey has only begun. With eternal faith in your potential, Grandfather. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.